Okay, so welcome all. Today we gather here to learn from the best. Thank you, EXELISIS, for touching on this very crucial topic for everybody. So you are going to enlighten us on proposal writing. And I hope that everybody is looking forward to listen to you.
Okay, let me share my screen then. Can you see it okay? Great. So, Hello everyone. I'm Apostolos Parlamas, and together with my colleague Nikos, we are going to present to you the proposal writing webinar. Before we start, a few things about EXELISIS. We are an engineering consulting group. We have members with a broad engineering background. We are involved in all phases of the development of an idea or a business, from its very initial steps to its end. That said, one of our primary focuses is innovation management services. That means management of ideas, technologies, products, services that can create or enter a market sector with the objective, of course, to be further developed. This focus has given us a lot of experience in European research and innovation projects, both in the project implementation phase, as well as in the proposal management phase, starting from the concept development and, of course, including the coordination and finalization of the proposal. So today, we're going to discuss about the role of innovation management in concept evaluation, why and how to begin with writing a proposal. And then my colleague Nikos will talk about excellence, impact, and the implementation part of the proposals with you. So, before we begin everything, we have to define innovation. Innovation is the process of taking an idea or invention and turning it into a product or service that creates value or attracts customers willing to pay for it. To have a successful innovation, your idea must be able to be replicated at an economical cost, and it must satisfy a specific need in the market. It is important to align innovation with market needs and economic feasibility to ensure its success and sustainability. Since we defined innovation, we have to talk about the management of the innovation now. Innovation management is a process which requires view and understanding of both market and technical problems of the project, with the goal to successfully implement appropriate creative ideas. Innovation management plays a critical role in bridging the gap between an idea and market-ready solutions. But why do management of innovation? In funded research, it's very crucial, actually, funded research is very crucial in advancing knowledge and driving progress. But it's not enough to stop at the discovery phase. We need to ensure that our discoveries can somehow benefit the society. And this is where innovation management comes into play. It's about more than just managing our innovations. It's about strategically navigating the entire innovation process from the conception to commercialization. This is called the exploitation of our results. So why should we prioritize innovation management? Because it's the key to unlock the full potential of our funded research. There are 5 approaches of innovation management. We have customer-based innovation management, which is heavily focused on the customer experience and ensures that every aspect of the interaction is designed to engage and satisfy the customer. Proactive business model innovation management that emphasizes on creating profound value and adapting quickly to market changes through modularity and flexibility. Frugal innovation management that aims at affordability and accessibility, often targeting underserved markets and later applying these innovations to more affluent segments. Then we have high-speed, low-risk innovation management. This is characterized by rapid development cycles continuous testing and risk mitigation through gradual rollouts. And lastly, we have integrated innovation management. Here, the innovation is integrated into the core business strategy, encouraging widespread ownership and focusing on both incremental and radical innovations. From those approaches, there is not one answer that is correct or a universal approach. Most efficient use of innovation management is always case dependent. Okay, so what are the key duties of innovation management? You have to monitor and collect market needs and customer requirements. You have to identify any mismatch between the project values and market or customer needs. You have to observe for any additional added value which may be created during the implementation phase of the project. Bring necessary attention to the consortium for any decision regarding an external or internal opportunity, and then implement those decisions into exploitation activities. And of course, the last one is to do a deep pattern search. One of the key terms that you're going to find in proposals is technology readiness level, or else TRL. This term start being found in proposals since Horizon 2020, but now in Horizon Europe projects, TRL is something that has to be specifically defined in the proposal. But what is TRL? TRL is a rating that provides a standardized way to access the readiness of technologies for deployment. It can offer a common language to evaluate the progress of projects and ensures alignment with the objectives that are set forth in core topics. By assigning a TRL rating to each project, the stakeholders can gain a clear understanding of its stage of development and make informed decisions regarding funding or collaboration and resource allocation. Now that we have established what does TRL means, special care should be taken when you report about your tasks and your work during the implementation of your project. Your tasks should be aligned with the TRL that you wrote in the proposal, of course, including terms and activities appropriate to each TRL. For example, validation, demonstration activities, any prototypes that you might have, etc. Another key term that you're going to find in front of you when you're involved in innovation management is IPR, or else intellectual property rights. This means the specific rights that are given to any creator or inventor when they generate an idea, a result. This result can be any tangible or intangible output, for example, database, and knowledge, information, methodology, a product that is generated from the project. Before determining the appropriate IPR method, all the partners must clarify their existing knowledge in the consortium agreement, which is a requirement by the grant agreement. Now, in the grant agreement, there is a specific paragraph that talks about ownership of the results. So when a partner is generating a result, he is the only one that owns it. But there are specific cases where two or more partners can collaborate to generate a result. This means that there is a joint ownership. So in that case, a joint ownership agreement must be drafted, which indicates the specific percentage of ownership of each partner and their obligations to that result. Let's move on now to why and how to begin writing a proposal. To develop your concept, there are a set of questions that you need to answer. The first set contains 5 key concept questions that you should answer briefly. These are: what is the problem that you want to address? Is this problem regional, national, or European? Could it be already solved? Why you must be solved now, and why it should be you that solves it? To answer these questions, we can consider 3 different aspects: science and technology, innovation, business, and policy. The above 5 questions that I showed you translate differently in respect to the aforementioned aspects. This creates a whole new table of important factors that you should consider and you should include in your proposal. What you see here marked in gray is actually all those factors that are associated with innovation management, and this is specifically the reason why we consider innovation management being that important in proposals. So the next set of questions are the value determining questions. The specific first part of those questions are the most important ones. The 3 first bullets that talk about the scope of your project, the limits, and the objectives are about the alignment with what the European Union is asking of you. The 4th bullet that talks about the expected impact of your project, it's also very important. That wasn't the case, though, since the beginning of funded projects. Until FP7, not much consideration was given on the impact of the research. This started changing during the Horizon 2020 funded projects, where impact started being more focused. Now that we're in Horizon Europe project, that focus on impact is even higher. So you have to pay very close attention when you talk about the expected impact of your project. The next thing you have to consider answering is, what will you do with those results? You have to be very specific on how you're going to exploit your results, how you're going to disseminate your results, and how you're going to initiate knowledge transfer. The next set of questions are to determine the feasibility of your concept. So with whom you're going to implement? Have you found your partners? Have you built your consortium? Have you divided the roles, the responsibilities of each one? Have you created your work packages? Next, you have to answer why the Europe has to fund your project. What are the unique selling points of your project? And what is the added value that your project, your idea will bring to the European Union? And of course, how much will your project or your whole idea cost? You have to create a detailed budget plan. The last set of questions has to show your commitment. So it's here the reviewers need to see if you are ready to start working on that project. Do you have enough resources? How are you going to manage your project? What is the methodology you're going to follow? Do you have the specific background for it? Do you have enough human or financial resources? In general, if you are ready. So before you even start considering writing a proposal, you have to check if your project idea is already being developed. You have to also check if your concept has a high innovation potential. You have to check if you have selected a suitable call and topic depending on your idea. Then, have you found the partners that you're going to build your consortium, as we said? Have you identified the key roles? Have you read, actually you must read the documentation, the EU documentation and the scientific papers that are related to the topic that you chose. You also have to plan, as we said, for your resources. You have to meet with your partners in order to involve them in key roles in your concept development. And you also have to prepare the detailed project outline, which also will include a draft budget calculation. In the next slide, we're presenting you the structure of the Horizon Europe funding framework for research and innovation. The whole framework that you see here is divided into sections, and these sections contain different programs. Each program has several components, and this whole structure will help into navigating this whole framework to find the most appropriate type of action, and then within that type of action, you will find the best suitable call or topic when you are interested in writing a specific proposal. In this list here, we list the various types of actions within the Horizon Europe Research and Innovation Framework. Each action here has a specific focus and purpose. Since the consortium partners of the Nexus project have expressed their interest for future research in research and innovation actions, In this presentation, we're going to focus more on these two. So when you start writing your proposal, you have to pay close attention to the requirements. These requirements will be given from the Commission. You will know what these requirements are, and you have to abide with them. If you don't, you risk losing points during the scoring process of your proposal. For example, one of the requirements is the page limit. This limit is very strict. This means that if your proposal exceeds this limit, the extra pages will be lost and the reviewer won't be able to read them. So the proposal structure in Horizon Europe is dictated by a specific template that is provided by the European Commission. It consists of two parts. We have the first part that contains information, administrative information, contact info of each organization and the researchers, background info, prior achievements, infrastructure, budget information. All these can be used as a criterion to persuade the reviewer of each partner's capacity regarding the project. This information can be entered through the submission system, of course, in the funding and tenders portal. Part B is where you will find the main proposal. In this section, it is divided into three subsections that correspond to each of the main evaluation criteria. And Nikos is going to talk about this in more detail later on. So this part needs to be uploaded as a PDF format in accordance, of course, with the proposal templates that are available through the submission system for the specific topic that you have chosen. So I'm going to stop here and give my turn to Nikos to talk about the excellence.
Understood.
Okay,
let me share my screen. Okay. So what Apostolos has described is pretty much how you develop your concept, how you evaluate your concept, if you consider that it has value, if you are ready to submit, if you believe that you have a complete, well-rounded idea and well-rounded concept, and how you should consider choosing the particular topic that you will propose your work for. So what we will see now is how you structure this proposal given all these steps that you have done. And we start from the first section, the excellence section. Just before that, I would like to, doesn't change the slides, okay. Give you an example. So given that you have chosen a particular topic that is well suited for the concept that you have in mind, please don't look at this particular topic. I'm just trying to make an example. You can then go use this link that Apostolos also mentioned, and I will have as part of the useful links right at the end of the presentation. Don't worry about that. And you go in the EU Funding and Tenders portal, where you can find all the descriptions necessary, all the forms, everything. So here, for example, let's say that we have chosen this topic as the most suitable one, and we are preparing now to start writing our proposal for this topic. So we go on the EU Funding and Tenders portal, and we can find there pretty much everything that we need, from administrative information regarding the expected budget of our proposal, things that have to do with the deadlines, the deadline model, if it's a single stage proposal, so you write an entire proposal and it gets evaluated just like that, or if it's a two-stage, so you write something that is a little bit briefer at the beginning, like a 10-page proposal. Then if you get past this first stage of evaluation, you move to a second stage proposal, or if it's a multi-stage, etc. There are some different ways. You can also find any kind of useful links that you might need for the description of the call under which your topic is categorized, as well as what you see here on the left, things that have to do with a particular topic. So the description of the topic, the destination, which is a little bit one or two calls, for example, some particular conditions that might apply We might see many different places where this is important. Regulations like page limit examples, page limit particularities, and they do have conditions about pretty much everything, including fonts, font sizes, and everything, as well as other information and updates on the code. So once you start preparing your proposal, this is the first thing you will do, and this is the first thing you will read: the topic description, the destination description, the conditions. You will be able to download the templates of the application form, and you will also be able to even see the evaluation form, so the form based on which you will be evaluated after submission. So for the excellence part, we start by showing you the general evaluation criteria, which can be summarized pretty much from what you see here. The main subset of criteria for the excellence criterion has to do, of course, with the objectives. The objectives need to be clear. They need to be relevant with what you're trying to achieve, with the problem you're trying to solve. The project needs to be ambitious. So this is supposed to be high-end, high-impact research. You have to be targeting realistic objectives, but ambitious. And of course, you have to go beyond the state of the art. So this is an actual part of what you will be evaluated on. Methodology-wise, the criteria are again what you see here. Mainly, you have to be able to persuade the evaluator, and the evaluator will be some expert that is appointed, expert in this particular field that you will be proposing this work. So you have to persuade them that what you are proposing, the methodology you are going to follow, is something that is scientifically sound, that it's doable. We'll see that later on. And then there are some other aspects that have been added that didn't used to be part of the criteria, the excellence criterion in Horizon 2020. They have been added in Horizon Europe, that have to do with the gender dimension that needs to be considered, the open science practices, as well as things that have to do with the research data management. And I will start by discussing those aspects because they are new and because they might seem a little bit out of place for you, or I don't know. And then move on to the rest of the proposal. So regarding open science, I guess most of you already know what open science is. It's the movement to make research and research results openly accessible to society. In some cases and in some particular calls or some particular topics, it might even be a pre-requirement set by the EU Commission that every result, all results, or some results are particularly openly available, made openly available. But in most cases, it's not a pre-requirement. It's a strong, let's say, it's guidance. So the European Commission wants EU-funded research to be as open as possible. And this includes, of course, considerations of open access of applications, open access of data, very well-constructed data management plan. We'll talk about that again. And also inclusion and considering open science practices in general, so use of open access data repositories, maximize the engagement with the society. These are all things that they might not be strict requirements, and there might be some asterisks. So for something that is commercially exploitable, not to be openly disseminated in order to keep the exploitation potential of it. But we are supposed to make research as open as possible, definitely. The other aspect that I mentioned, and this is also included in these sets of criteria in Horizon Europe, is data management. The evaluator will need to see that you have a brief draft plan on how you will be managing any kind of data that is generated and created or handled within your project. That means you have to define the FAIR aspects: findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability. That means you have to present some preliminary provisions, even starting from the proposal phase, about what kind of repositories will you use, any kind of specific aspects that you need to consider that are case dependent, case relevant. And this is very highly connected with the open science practices that we mentioned. So what type of open access data repositories you will be using, etc. Regarding the gender dimension, this is also now viewed as a criterion and needs to be taken very, very seriously. It's referring, and please pay attention to this. It's referring to the integration of sex and gender analysis into research, into the research that is conducted. This is not referring to just mentioning and showing the gender balance in the workforce. So how many researchers we have and what are the genders, trying to show that we have diversity, something like that. All this part about gender balance is now moved into part A. It is still important. They still look at that. It is actually, it has been explained when the Horizon Europe program was first presented, how this will be taken into account. But in this part, within excellence, what they mean by gender dimension is how inside your research, inside the activities, the impact assessment, the sustainability assessment, design of materials, products, etc., how do you take into account sex and gender analysis? And why is this important? We have some examples here that, of course, might be completely different from one field to the other. Just imagine, for example, that you need to take into account different critical properties for females and males, or that when creating some kind of end product and equipment, some kind of clothing, textiles, anything, different genders or different sexes might have different body characteristics, might have different needs, market needs. When you're discussing in your proposals, for example, algorithms, maybe not necessarily, but maybe gender diversity, gender aspects or racial aspects are something that you need to take into account. So this is something that you need to show that you're taking into account and you are considering, and you will actually be considering such parameters in your research. So moving on to the subsections and the format of the proposal and the excellence section. The first one has to do with objectives and ambitions. And we are mentioning here this indication of 4 pages long. Keep in mind that this is not, this is just an indication. What you should pay attention to is the total length of the proposal. So this is a very strict limit. If it says 45 pages, that's 45, not 46. Now, how you will define and divide the different subsections, it's entirely up to you. So any kind of limits that you see on the top here in all of these sections are just indicative. So the objectives is probably the most important subsection of your proposal. You have to state what are the objectives of your project. You have to make clear and pertinent objectives. You have to make something that is achievable, measurable, that is practical, makes sense, it is ambitious, everything that we mentioned earlier. You also need to make sure that those objectives are aligning perfectly with the exploitation strategy of your project that you will later on present, as well as with the scope of the project, scope of the topic that you're trying to submit a proposal for, and any kind of requirements that are in there, any kind of indications that are in there, you take them very, very seriously. In this section, you also should be explaining what Apostolos mentioned earlier. What is the problem that you're defining as a problem that you're trying to solve, right? So what is the question you're trying to provide an answer for? What is this that you're trying to do? Why is it valuable as well? And we have here this mention of SMART objectives. This is actually, there has been around for quite a while in Horizon Europe as well. So SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. As you can understand, these are all characteristics that should should define what type of objectives you are setting, and that are pretty much describing different parameters that you should take into account when writing your objectives. And on the right side of the screen here, you can see some indicative examples of how to write those objectives in particular. So we're talking about very specific things. So if you're doing something technical, your objective should be very, very relevant to what you're doing. If you have critical properties to achieve, your objective should include these critical properties. It should quantify as much as possible and be measurable. So quantification might mean particular properties might mean some particular concentration, some particular percentage, achievement, something like that. It should also be something achievable. So we're looking at something that you need to be able to persuade the evaluator that it is realistic. It's not something that is crazy. We're not saying that in 4 years we will reinvent the wheel, or that we will, I don't know, achieve a complete revolution of a specific field. So it needs to be down on earth, and it's very important also to be very well time-oriented. So you need to have some kind of a timeline, which then also will be connected with the way that you will plan your project's implementation. So the third section that we will talk about later. Now, staying in this subsection, because as I said, this is probably the most important part. You also need, so you define the problem that you're trying to solve. You define the objectives of your project, and you also need to define why your project is to be considered innovative. So how is it going beyond the state of the art? And as we said, this is actually mentioned explicitly as one of the criteria to be considered in excellence. And why is it ambitious? So what is new? What are you doing which has value? Are you doing something that has not been done before, or are you doing something that has been done before, but you're doing it just better or much better? So what is the value in this? And specifically the innovation value. So are you developing some new approach, some new concept? Are you talking about new products? Or are you going to be presenting some kind of a new organization, new service, improved product, service, something like that? And if it's improved, if it's referring to any existing products, you might have defined the state of the art, but if there are also existing products or services, show how you will be advancing that, show how this is important to refer to them to be able to persuade the evaluator of your argument. And finally, for this subsection, you also need to define what Apostolos mentioned, the TRL, technology readiness level maturity. So this is pretty much, you need to explain where you're at this stage, so before the start of your project, if it's going to be funded, and what are your targets? So what is the target TRL? This is usually something that you have to be very careful and completely align with what is described within the description of your topic. So within the topic description, have a technology readiness level range that this topic is referring to. So if it says that proposals are expected to start from TRL 3 to 4 and end at 5, this is what it means. So you have to show and explain and argument that these technologies are indeed within this range. So moving on to the next section. The next section is the methodology section. Again, here, the 15 pages is just an indication. The methodology section is a little bit more straightforward for most of you, I guess. This is where you pretty much, as it says, well, you describe the overall methodology. Now that you have explained in the previous subsection what you're trying to do, what are your objectives, what is the problem that you're trying to solve, what is the state of the art that you're trying to advance, and you have mentioned a little bit about how you consider your project, your proposed research advancing. Now you have to explain how you're going to do it. And you have to try your best. And sometimes it's actually hard because it's based on even unpublished research, but you have to try your best to explain to the evaluator and persuade them that you are in a position to do that, that you have a specific way, a concept on how to achieve that. This section also includes some many other aspects. First, of course, you also should describe the overall methodology, the overall approach of how your project is going to combine different actions, like what you see here, demonstration activities, piloting activities, replication activities. Looking at it from a more macroscopic, let's say, perspective, that is always something that we tend to do. But then there are other things that you also need to mention in this methodology section, trying to pretty much make your case for the evaluator. So you have to identify any kind of transdisciplinary considerations. So the different disciplines and how they come together to achieve what your concept is aiming to achieve. You also have to show what are your previous experience from national and international, specifically if there is European research and innovation activities that can be related. So similar projects, related projects, projects that you're going to be based on and you have participated. This can be especially important, especially when the relation is strong. So for example, when you're using the outputs of a previous project or a project that you're currently involved in for a project that you are now proposing, this can be a very strong argument. And then you also have to, where relevant, of course, describe integration of social sciences and humanities, which is something that now it's been taken a little bit more seriously as a criterion in Horizon Europe, and also include all these other aspects that I said that have been added as sub-criteria in the excellence section, the gender dimension, the open science practices. So you need to have some kind of like half pages or one paragraph, a couple of paragraphs, a table or something like that, explaining each one of those aspects. So explaining how your research, your methodology integrates gender dimension, as we said earlier that it does. If it doesn't, if you consider this is not applicable in your particular topic, that's okay, but you do have to justify it. You have to do the same with open science practices. Explain and present a little bit how you perceive the open science practices in your proposed work, how you define the research data management, and of course, there are specific guides that you can use from Horizon Europe to help you formulate that. Now, I would stop here if there are any questions, particularly on section 1, so that we can answer any of those questions now and move forward with section 2 later. So please feel free, raise hand or open your microphone. Just to help people, don't forget if you would like to discuss something about this section now, so not leave it for right at the end. Yes, Ariadne?
Yes, you mentioned that we can download also the evaluation forms and the submission forms and the evaluation forms. So is it a good practice when you are writing the excellent part, for example, to structure your writing in terms of the evaluation forms criteria? So then you are guessing that the evaluator will look at your text and it will see the title of the evaluation criteria and take this part, like you are answering exactly on what he's asked to evaluate.
It is pretty much structured like this already. So the first set of criteria that, if you remember, well, I can show you, you don't have to remember. This first set of criteria talking about objectives, this is all 1.1, subsection 1.1. And then your subsection 1.2, so this is already done by the Commission in Horizon Europe. They did a little bit of a reformulation of both the ESR, the evaluation report form, and also of the template, the application form. So they've already tried to do it themselves. It is, I think, there is no specific rule that is stopping you from showing different things in different places if you would like. You can even claim something that is part of the excellence criterion. You can put it within the impact criterion. This is okay, as long as it's easy for the reviewer, the evaluator, to understand that. You know what I mean? So if they are used in a specific format, it is always a risk to change it, but it's not something that cannot pay off, right? So this should be totally open for any proposal writer to decide, and there might be good reasons for such a proposal to change a little bit the format and how these things are presented. Sure, that is fine. Any other questions, or should we continue? What do you think? Okay, I don't see any hands raised, so I'm going to continue with section 2. All right. So section 2 is referring to the impact. As Apostolos mentioned earlier, this is something that the European Commission services, when describing the funding programs of both Horizon 2020 and even more in Horizon Europe, they've been trying to stress its importance. The reason why they do that is because for many years they've been realizing, or we've been realizing anyway, that European funding for research has been a little bit underperforming when compared with the innovation process of other places, like for example in the USA. So they've been watching them fund a lot of research that is not making it to the market, so it doesn't return something as an impact back to the society. So they've been trying to place more and more focus on the impact related criteria. And this is why Apostolos was showing earlier that if you see most of the key questions that need to be answered and you place them in terms of science, of business, and of policy, most of them are related with innovation management. So they put more and more focus on that. Now, some important clarifications in terms of terminology, pretty much, but also in terms of the way the European Commission wants to structure its proposals and its narrative in terms of impact. There are two things that are important. The expected outcomes of the topic and the expected impacts of the destination. The expected outcomes of the topic is a terminology that is used to characterize what is pretty much the medium-term impact of your proposal, so the expected contribution of your proposal to something specific that is clarified and defined within the topic description. And I will show exactly what I mean. The term expected impacts is a little bit focusing more on the wider impacts of the destination. So of something that is including not only your topic, but other topics and other calls. It's something that is looking a little bit more on the longer term, and it's pretty much a bit more vague. So to give you an indication, as we said, you go to the funding and tenders portal, you look at the topic that you consider that is the most suitable for the concept that you have in mind, and you don't need to read that. And I'm just trying to make an example. I said you can find a lot of things here. You will find a subsection called the topic description. In the topic description, you have a clear indication of what is the expected outcomes. So this medium-term contribution of your proposal to either all of these expected outcomes or a part of them. So in this example here, it says that the project's results are expected to contribute to all the following expected outcomes. So your proposal should have some kind of a contribution to all these bullet points that are defined here in the description. You could have another example, another topic, saying that you should contribute to at least 2, at least 3, something like that. That is fine. So these are the expected outcomes. This is the medium-term impact that your proposal should have, and you're supposed to explain that in this impact section. I will show a little bit later how. And what you see here on the bottom is the topic destination. It is also included in this very specific subpage in the EU funding and tender portals. So before writing and starting to write your proposal, you open that section, you read the whole thing, because it also mentions a lot of policies, a lot of important things that need to be considered, some key strategic objectives, etc., things that help you understand what they're expecting of you. And you also pay a lot of attention for this particular thing, so for the impact section, on the exact definition of what they define as expected impacts. So these are wider things, like things that cannot be achieved from one day to the other, or things that are not expected to be achieved by a project, but they are expected to be achieved by all the projects that aim at those wider impacts from Horizon Europe in general. So these are long-term, wider impacts that you're expected to have a project that will contribute and a little bit affect those. So the general evaluation criteria, now that we have defined what they mean by expected outcomes and impacts, this is what the general evaluation criteria for the impact section can be summarized as. So in Horizon 2020, it was a little bit different. In Horizon Europe, they have started talking about these key impact pathways that I will show exactly what they mean by that later on. Key impact pathways that you need to make a proposal that shows that you have a key impact pathway that is credible towards the expected outcomes and impacts. So you persuade about your credibility regarding what contribution your proposal work will have in these expected outcomes and impacts. How likely is it that this work will actually make a difference, and how significant? So quantification. How significant will this difference going to be? Another subset of criteria within the impact criterion in general is the measures that you are planning, that you are proposing, measures to maximize this impact, maximize the expected outcomes and impacts. And we're talking about, of course, a brief dissemination exploitation plan that needs to be included in this section, as it used to be also in Horizon 2020. And we're also talking about the judgment of how suitable and appropriate these measures are for your particular proposed work, for any kind of particularities you have. So I said about the key impact pathways. This is what the key impact pathways are translated to. So in Horizon Europe, as I said, they started discussing about formulating the impact in the form of these key impact pathways. They then started using the terminology projects pathways towards impact later on. It's the same thing. What it means is pretty much what you see in this scene. So they consider the implementation of the project like this. So you have an input, which is the workforce, all the knowledge, the pre-existing knowledge, those new ideas, of course, the funding, the European Commission, that generates these results of your project. We'll discuss a little bit later what we define as results. And you then propose certain measures, exploitation, dissemination, and communication measures that will help you help those results translate to what you now will claim as your expected the contribution of your project, your proposal, to the expected outcomes, which is what you should define in this impact section. And then all this contribution to the expected outcomes is also connected to contribution to the wider impacts. And both expected outcomes and impacts, as we said, they are defined from the work program itself. So they are something that you need to align with and not come up with completely from scratch. So to look exactly on how this is structured, the impact section has subsection 2.1. It's called projects pathway towards impact. Doesn't mean that you cannot rename it, of course, but I mean, this is the most usual way we do that. And this should be formulated as pretty much a narrative that describes this key impact pathway that we saw earlier. So that describes that your project will contribute in a particular way and make a difference in terms of the expected outcomes. So what is the unique contribution of your project to the expected outcomes, and what is the unique contribution of your project to the wider impacts, the ones from the destination, defined from the destination. Be aware, and this is very important, this is a comment that very oftenly reviewers like to stress when they see someone getting a little bit more general. Be aware that this should be specifically focusing on the particular effect of your project. So not aggregating, like with a particular effect of a lot of initiatives together or a specific field entirely or something like that. Also, it is very important within this narrative to identify the target groups. So what are the target groups, the groups of stakeholders? Are they academics? Are they end users? What type of end users? Like, what are the target groups for each of the expected outcomes? What are the target groups for the results of your project? In terms of wider impacts, and we do mention it here, that it shouldn't be the same amount of time and space spent between expected outcomes and impacts. Usually, this is a little bit briefer, but expected impacts should be formulated in a way defining, categorizing them to scientific impacts. So what will be the wider scientific impacts of your proposed work's contribution, economic, technological, and societal. So 3 different subtypes. And of course, something else that is also very important, if your proposed work is including any kind of negative environmental outcome or impact, so this is something that you should not try to neglect. You should not try to leave it like this, but this is something that needs to be well defined and demonstrate and show to the evaluator that this is something that will be perfectly managed, and actually persuade them that it's still the impact is still very much positive. So if, for example, you're trying to develop some kind of formulation, a material to substitute something that is toxic, or something like that, and within the process of formulating your much better material, you still are using something that is also a little bit negative environmentally, this is something that you should not try to overlook, because it might generate a negative comment from the evaluator and also a negative point. But this is something that you have to define, show that you're very well aware of that, and that you have taken it into full account. Also, regarding this section, and of course, with less importance, maybe less space, but you should also be describing any other potential barriers, requirements for the impact generation that you identify, any risk factors in terms of impact. So any kind of regulations that you know are in place, any kind of social trends that you can see your proposed work getting affected by, market trends, dynamics, etc. And also try to explain how you position your proposed work. So what are the contingency plans that you have regarding those things, those factors. Finally, regarding this subsection, and I put it here as the last slide because this is also entirely new in Horizon Europe in terms of how it is formulated, how the questions are formulated, but it doesn't mean that it has to be completely separate. You are specifically asked, and I have it in green here, the words scale, significance, and quantification, because they are also mentioned, explicitly mentioned in the evaluation criteria. You are asked to define what is your estimation in terms of scale and significance of your project's contribution, and quantify it as much as possible, if applicable. By scale, what we mean is what you see here. So how widespread do you expect, do you see your outcomes be? Like, what is the size of your target group, or any kind of benefits that you foresee, how widespread they are, and then how significant they are. The example we have here is like, of course, an ideal example of if you're developing something in pharma, then if you can quantify from the proposal stage of how many years you're expecting to add of healthy life years for a patient, that is amazing. But I have another example, the energy consumption reduction. So for example, if you can quantify, and this is so much easier, if you're working on something that has to do with reduction of environmental footprint, you should be able to make some kind of a prediction on and quantification of the reduction of the environmental footprint. So how many kilograms of CO2 equivalent do you believe that this will benefit the target material, for example, that you're looking to substitute? You should try to explain all your baselines, because I talked about quantification. This is also very important. You should try to explain any kind of assumptions that you have made and baselines in order to be as persuasive as possible. And of course, I've mentioned here again, you should try to focus on the contribution of your project in particular. Don't try to make it too general, because it will not probably go well with the evaluator. Moving on to the next section, section 2.2. This is a section where you are supposed to define the measures to maximize the impact. So dissemination, exploitation, and communication measures. Again, here, the 5 pages size is indicative. It is up to you. This is pretty much the section where you are expected to present a brief and draft first version of the plan for exploitation and dissemination results, what has been called PEDR before. Now in the new application form templates of Horizon 2020, it's called PDEC, Plan for Dissemination and Exploitation activities, including communication, but it's the same thing. Remember that this is a criterion, so this is something that needs to be sound, it needs to be persuasive, and it needs to be judged as efficient. So this includes everything from communication activities, where you're trying to maximize the public outreach, the selection of what tools, what messages, what channels you are going to implement, the connection of those things with those aspects with the different target groups that you should have already identified in section 2.1. And the best identification in section 2.1, the easier your work here. Any kind of particularities that have to do with what is the particular project scale, what are the particular requirements of your project, they also need to be taken into account. You need to show and argument that the measures that you're showing here are suitable for the particular target groups or suitable for the particular purposes. And then you have a lot of different other details, minor details, that I'm not going to spend a lot of time discussing that. What I want to include is that an example, when projects, for example, they are in particularly aiming at having any kind of interaction with policymakers, either getting feedback or providing support to policymakers, this is something that is expected of you to show there. So to include it as part of your measures to maximize its impact and particularly focus on that. And of course, keep in mind that this as a plan is something that will then need to be updated if the project gets funded. Now the new regulations say that it should be updated by month 6, and it would probably then need to be updated again further down the project. Some important mentions that I wanted to make, I'm not going to stay a lot on this, are things that usually also we try to take into account and make sure that we do is the differentiation, for example, between dissemination and communication. This is something that reviewers will want to see that it's very clear in your proposal. So communication is much more about increasing visibility, reaching wider audiences that are not experts, that are not specialized in the subject that you are proposing your work. Just informing pretty much the EU taxpayers where their money is spent on. So trying to inform the society about your research objectives and what you're doing in a more simple way, easily understood. Dissemination, on the other side, is much more targeted. It's targeted knowledge transfer. It's trying to make sure that your results and your scientific outputs reach the specific target groups that you have identified. So we're talking about particular conferences, particular trade fairs, if you're discussing also about the involvement of industry, actions that are much more targeted and that will make sure that you facilitate the maximization of the exploitation potential of your results. Again, another clarification has to do with the differentiation pretty much of project results compared to key exploitable results, which is something that very commonly gets confused. And what we mean by that is that pretty much project results can be pretty much anything, any kind of output from your European project. So from what your proposal will be resulting to.
Μίλησα με αυτόνα.
While,
με είπε εντάξει τώρα ένα παραπάνω, ένα λιγότερο, γιατί του είπα κάποια μπαίνουν, λέει δεν υπάρχει θέμα.
So the difference between proposal results and key exploitable results is that key exploitable results are actually a subset of your project results. They are the results that can actually be further exploitable with more research, with market-oriented exploitation. The word key is here the main focus, and they are the results that should summarize pretty much the value proposition of your proposed work. So not everything is a key exploitable result, and it makes a much better impact for the evaluator to be able to understand by just looking at your section 2.2 that you have already well identified which are the key exploitable results that you are expecting your proposed work to produce. Another mention regarding this section is something that has been gaining a little bit more attention by the evaluators over the recent years, is the IPR management. So in this section, you're also expected to include a brief description of the intellectual property rights management, as Apostolos has already mentioned. In this section, your work, similarly to pretty much anything that I've mentioned so far, is to try to persuade the evaluator that you are in a position and you have the capacity and the capability to manage the intellectual property rights, and that you will take the appropriate measures to do so, so that you will achieve a frictionless exploitation of your results, or that you will, enable your consortium to achieve the frictionless exploitation of the results, either within the project or in the post-project period. So Apostolos mentioned that very important thing is the consortium agreement, where you're defining pretty much everything, background, etc., access rights, all these legal clauses that can play an important role later on in the exploitation process. But also other things are important. So consideration of use of tools and platforms, like, of course, considering the result ownership list that needs to be produced with a very clear ownership and very clear characterization of the key exploitable results right at the end of your Horizon Europe project. That is important. That's something that we have to mention there. Any kind of other kind of process or kind of agreements that you will be exploring need to be mentioned there. If we're talking about something that has commercial exploitation potential, then you would probably also need to provide some kind of an indication of how you would support this exploitation potential. So, for example, some pattern mapping activities would be something that you need to mention there. You need to plan. And of course, anything that you mentioned there should also be included in the work plan in section 3. I take that for granted. And we close the impact section with section 2.3, the summary. So there is no page indication in the template. So if you open the template, there is no page indication. This is translated to the summary being included in the 5-page indication length of section 2.2. So keep that in mind. So what the summary is supposed to be is an overview, a canvas overview of the key impact pathways that we discussed. So trying to pretty much have a conclusion section where you show what this key impact pathway should finally look like in your proposed work, and including a summarization of the measures to maximize impact that you're considering. So pretty much a summary of section 2.1 and 2.2. I will show you just the example from within the template. It looks like 6 boxes. Here you see the first 3. So you need to identify very briefly what is the problem, what are the needs, what is the problem you're trying to solve. Then summarize the results. This can be either the key exploitable results that you have identified, or some kind of a categorization of the key exploitable results together with project results, outputs, anything that you would like to include in this summary output of your impact section. Then pretty much the same summarization of what are the key measures of dissemination, exploitation, and communication. You can see some examples here. You can find those examples in the application form template. This is nothing new. And the next 3 boxes are pretty much what are the target groups that you have identified, the target groups that you will enforce these impact maximization measures on your results to reach those target groups. What are the expected outcomes that you are aiming to achieve by reaching those target groups with your results? And then what is the contribution of your work to the wider impacts in terms of scientific, economic, and societal. And here, the most important part, of course, is how you define and how you group the outcomes contribution of your work. So again, here, I'm going to stop a little bit in case someone would like to ask something particular about the impact section before we move forward. Any question on this part of the presentation? I mean, we can always have more questions at the end. It's just, I thought it would be easier not to let a lot of time pass between each of the sections. I'm going to continue then with the implementation section. So this is the last section of your proposal, the implementation section. Still, we're talking about the part B of your proposal. The general evaluation criteria for this section are what you see here. Of course, the most important part has to do with your work plan being presented as an efficient and high quality work plan. So persuade the evaluator that the way that you have divided work and that you have planned work, timely planned work, I mean, will be effective, will be achievable, and is well planned in terms of resources, in terms of everything. Of course, something that is very important is the assessment of the risks. So this is something that usually you can very easily end up having a comment, because this is something that is usually placed right at the end of the proposal. It is something that many academics view as not very important, and it can cost them a couple of comments very easily. And then, of course, the particular distribution of the effort and of the resources within this work plan is something that needs to be very carefully conducted, because this is actually a criterion for the evaluator to look into. And then, of course, the consortium is judged on both a participant level and on a consortium level. On a participant level, what they look at is the capacity of each participant to complete their assigned role, and of course, the definition of what is their role. And on the consortium level, of course, is whether or not the consortium composition has the necessary expertise to do what has been promised to deliver this particular work plan. The main points of the implementation section are what you see here. Of course, there is the work package structure, so the division of the work to different tasks and subtasks, which is very important. Definition of who is leading what, so leaders of work packages, leaders of particular tasks, leaders of activities, who is the leading beneficiary for each of the deliverables, for example. Then, of course, the allocation of this work and distribution of this work in terms of a timeline, so the timetable, how this looks in Gantt chart. The management structure, this can be very case dependent, so it might contain any kind of an advisory board that you will form, any management structure for the proposal, the project implementation phase, or for the post-project phase. And of course, the inclusion of milestones, which is something very important in terms of making sure of the continuous monitoring of the project. The assessment of the risks, and we will also talk about that later, and in some cases that this is applicable, some kind of conflict resolution mechanisms or any kind of particular provisions that need to be done. So in terms of the structure, section 3.1 is the work plan and resources structure. We usually start that by giving an overview of the work division, distribution, and how this is planned in terms of time. So we usually include some kind of a Gantt chart like the one you see here, where it is very important to try to make sure that your Gantt chart shows a job that is, distribution of resources and allocation of focus at each different phase of the project in the optimal way. So how different, we also use a PERT chart, so pretty much trying to show which work plan component, which work package is communicating with what type of inputs, feedbacks, what type of connections, what is done in parallel, for example, any kind of causal relation between different work packages and different activities. But what is very important is to make sure that the way that this is planned is feasible, is allowing for all of the activities to be completed and monitored properly, and allowing for all the activities to safely be executed, taking into account the complexity of any other activities that they have to rely on. What you see here on the right are the very simplified templates that have been recently updated in Horizon Europe in terms of how a work package, the list of work packages in general, and then how each of the work packages should be presented with a number, title, and then straight away with the objectives and the description. This is something that also we need to mention, is that the work package division and the activity division has to reflect the projects and the complexity of not only of the project, but of particular activities, but also the focus that you would like to place on particular activities. So to give you an example, if we're talking about proposal for a project within the framework of safety and sustainability by design, so developing some materials that are safe and sustainable by design, then you definitely need to show this focus of yours to safety and sustainability by having separate work package, either doing the same, both of the assessments or something like that, showing how this will be connected with other kind of activities like development, formulation, and or validation. Demonstrate that in both in terms of timeline, but also in terms of allocation of resources. And also allow, as we said, for the progress of your project to be monitored throughout the time duration of your project. And there are other rules, again, that we can also mention, but they are minor in terms of they are requesting for particular work package to be allocated on project management administration. They also request for the data management plan creation to be something that is explicitly mentioned, or they are requesting for a particular work package for dissemination, exploitation, and communication activities. In general, these are, in terms of impact, minor compared to the division of the work. Another thing that we need to mention is, of course, the lists of deliverables and milestones that need to be presented. The form that this has been done has changed. They used to be directly under the description of the deliverables. Now we do it in separate tables. This is, again, you don't need to search a lot every time that you would like to go ahead and prepare a proposal. You can be based on the particular application forms that you will find, the templates that you will find on funding and tenders about your particular proposal. So you can be sure about that. What is important here is, of course, to, as I said, to assign the deliverables and characterize all these different aspects, like, of course, the leading beneficiary, but also what is the dissemination level, what is the delivery time, make sure that these are reasonable and that these take into account a lot of factors that might affect the delivery time and your capacity to deliver these reports, or not reports, demonstration activities, whatever the deliverable might be, in time. And of course, then milestones. So setting up milestones for all of the work plans, so for all work packages, making sure that the work plan can be monitored efficiently with these milestones, and making sure that the means of verification are the most appropriate ones. I also mentioned about risks. I mentioned that this is something that is usually, there is a tendency to be overlooked, and it can cost quite a lot in terms of the evaluation of the project. Risks here need to be clearly and very well identified for all of the work packages. And also, it is very important to propose the risk mitigation strategies, taking into account that they might be necessary, but also showing and persuading the reviewer that this is going to be something that will still not stop the consortium from delivering the outcomes that they have pretty much promised they would in this work. Some other tables are also included. We're going to spend a lot of time on that. So tables that have to do, for example, with subcontracting costs, if they are applicable. Tables that have to do with the purchase costs. We're going to talk a little bit again about what type of costs we're talking about later on. So any kind of money that will be necessary for traveling, for other goods, for consumables. And there's a particular rule, for example, that says that these kind of tables, this kind of information needs to be clarified only for partners that exceed a certain percentage of these purchase costs over their respective personnel costs. This can be of minor importance, but this is something that you might face frequently when involved in proposal writing. The last section of your proposal is section 2.2. This is the section about the capacity of both the participants and consortium. As I said, there are two levels that the evaluators are supposed to look at, both the participant and consortium level. This is pretty much a section that is including a lot of considerations about showing how the consortium and the different partners have the capacity to do what has been promised. It is including mentions to the infrastructure and equipment that is necessary. This has recently been also moved in part A, so the mentions that should be made here are a little bit briefer. It is also usually including a description of the complementarity aspects, so who is doing what and how everything is coming together to result in the project outcomes that we would like. Also, some assessment of all the different roles of each partner, so the industrial partners, the academic partners that are involved, and how this is combined within this proposed work. A lot of different things from time to time you can find reasonable here, like presenting, for example, distribution of budget per type of partners, academics or industrial, depending on whether or not this makes any sense for the proposed work. So what type of project are you aiming to have, or any kind of distribution between different countries, showing things like that. This is a subsection that is often confused because of some similarities that you might identify. For example, we talked about the complementarity aspects in this section, and in section 1 in excellence, there is another subsection talking about interdisciplinarity. You should try to make sure that you're not mentioning the same things twice, but change the perspective and deliver something that helps the reviewer be more sold on the idea of the proposed work. And now, finally, we'll close the seminar with a little bit, some very generic stuff about partnership and budgeting. I'm saying very generic because this is usually the topic for completely separate webinars that are very important, especially for people working on administrative positions from universities and RTOs that are dealing with partnership and budgeting issues. So I'm not going to go into a lot of details, just very briefly explaining that there are certain rules and requirements that need to be met. In the case of research innovation actions, RIAs, and innovation actions, yes, that we are mentioning here, the conditions, there are some minimum conditions. There are some conditions that have to do with how many legal entities. I mean, cannot be an individual project. You need at least 3 independent legal entities. You have some conditions that have to do with where those legal entities are based, European countries, member states, or associated countries, for example, UK, Switzerland, etc., but with particular asterisks. And then there are other conditions that may apply. As we said in the funding and tenders portal, all these conditions will be accessible to you. Something that is very important to consider when formulating a partnership and going forward with a proposal preparation is what we say here is state of mind. So this needs to be focusing on problems that have an international dimension. And it needs to be somehow balancing a European consortium. And of course, it needs to demonstrate that it has just enough relevant partners. Regarding the budgeting of the project, and I said we're not going to go into a lot of details, this is very important, and this can actually affect the evaluation of your proposal. You need to be rational in the way that you're balancing your budget, not only between different partners, but also between different activities and different phases of the project, different phases of the project implementation. Sorry, and we're also going to discuss a little bit about the cost categories now, but there's a lot of information and a lot of webinars giving a lot of explanations about the somehow complex terms in terms of eligibility of costs, which costs are eligible, how they are eligible, what is the reporting process, how everything is reported and budgeted. So we're not going to go into these details. Regarding the costs, the main cost categories that you need to have in mind when you're preparing a proposal is, of course, the direct costs, the personnel costs, have to do with how much effort, so the salaries of the personnel that are participating in the project. The other direct costs, which includes subcontracting, if subcontracting is necessary, or includes, of course, purchase costs. That can be consumables, that can be equipment, taking into account depreciation. Again, a lot of information can be found online from the European Commission Services official webinars explaining this. Should not go into a lot of detail there. And then there are the indirect costs, which are a flat rate of 25% on the sum of the personnel plus the other direct costs. And this is supposed to cover a lot of other indirect costs, which is, for example, phone bills, the electricity bill, rents, etc. So the budget that you are expecting to receive in this type of projects is the direct costs together with the other costs multiplied by this flat rate of 1.25. We should mention here that this is applicable for RTOs, research and technology organizations, universities, non-profit organizations, but for profit organizations, so SMEs mainly, but also, of course, large enterprises, these rates are not always 100%. So for research and innovation actions, as Apostolos showed you earlier, this is 100%. These are actions that are looking at lower TRLs, while for innovation actions that are looking at higher TRLs, that you're considered to be participating in an action that is closer to the market and that you have, let's say, closer pathway to commercial exploitation, you are expected as a for-profit organization to actually contribute yourself. So the funding rate ranges from like 50 to 70. This can change depending on the topic, the type of the particular call, etc., many things. Usually it's around 70%. But this is something that you will have access to as information. I mean, every time that you start your proposal from the funding and tenders portal. Finally, here I added a screenshot of the template, the budget table that is included in Part A. So this is something that you need to do the calculations beforehand, and then you upload in Part A, cross-checking once or twice. And also an example, a very brief example, doesn't matter where from, but this is an example of the per month allocation that should be done between different partners and different work packages. And this is something that not only the evaluator will look at, trying to make sure that there is no inefficient funding for a particular type of activity, or that something that is important and something that is complex has not been considered according to its complexity in terms of funding and research allocation, but it will also be taken into account later on in the implementation of your project if it gets funding. So you need to be careful in the allocation and trying to anticipate as much as possible. Here we have included some useful links. As I said, the first one is the participants portal. We have the reference documents for Horizon Europe, where you can find pretty much everything in terms of the entire work program, as well as as well as other guides. We have an annotated model grant agreement. This is like a template for the grant agreement that will be signed later on if your proposal gets selected for funding. We have the online Horizon manual, which is explaining and giving guidance for a lot of things that we have mentioned here, like for dissemination, for IPR management, for a lot of things, fully updated. And of course, the beneficiaries register user guide that is very useful for the registering your organization for the first time to participating in this type of proposals. So thank you very much for your attention. We would be more than happy to answer to any questions, either on this section or on previous sections as well. Yes, please, Marianne.
Yes, from your experience, how many people need to come together and work on a proposal to have more chances to be successful? I guess it's impossible.
Good question.
It's impossible for one person to take this on.
No, it's not impossible.
Okay, yeah.
It's not impossible, but I mean, for one person to do everything on their own, first it means that this person should be an expert academically, an expert on the particular field that we are discussing. Since these projects are by definition interdisciplinary, that is going to be, I guess, impossible in case someone is Leonardo da Vinci. So usually, yes, you need a lot of collaboration, and you usually need someone or a team that is leading and managing the proposal writing process as a process. But it will definitely require input from the experts, and the experts, of course, will be the participants. Otherwise, there wouldn't be participants if they're not experts, right? So this is an iterative process. It involves a lot of meetings, a lot of brainstorming at the beginning, early stages of the concept development, of changing the initial idea, because it always changes the initial idea, changing the initial idea in order to ensure the alignment that Apostolos was mentioning, the alignment with the topic description, with the destination description, the inclusion of all the activities that are required by all the different sets of guidelines that we mentioned. And then starting developing a concept node, working on the identification of beyond the state of the art, trying to understand what is the innovation, what are the methodologies, asking for text specifically about the methodologies. For example, my background is in chemical engineering, and my background in chemical engineering doesn't include everything in chemical engineering. So I know some parts of modeling, for example, not everything. So if we're working on something that has to do with material science, I would definitely ask for the partners that bring this expertise for some text describing the methodologies, giving us some references, how we would like to present this. And this is an iterative process. So the how long does it take? It's also very case dependent. So, and also very much depending on the people and the expertise, the field and the experience. I would say to do a good job, take about 2 months, maybe, of collaboration, something like that. Of course, taking into account that the pace of work is not constant and stable, of course. There is a very high peak towards the end, as usual, but it is important to allocate enough time, start in advance, start planning, start having these discussions, and make sure that you're not missing anything.
And then if I can ask something else, if you put in a proposal and it's not successful, and then there is another call and somehow the topic is similar, of course it will be on your general, research interests. Is it good to take things from the other proposal try to adjust, or is it better to start from scratch?
It's very common to resubmit. It's very common. You will never find a topic that is identical, of course, by definition, but it's very common for one reason or the other, or due to very high competition, for example, or due to a particular element not being tackled well enough, so that you don't get funding, and then you find another topic that is suitable, that your core idea is suitable also for there. You adjust, and yeah, that is pretty common. Keep in mind that this kind of actions, the research innovation actions and the innovation actions, are very, very competitive. So the average success rates, as claimed by the European Commission, I mean, their statistics, they are like, depending on different fields and calls, particular calls, things like that, they go around like 12, 15%. That means over 8 of the proposals that you submit out of 10 will get rejected in average. People that have more experience and are good at what they're doing, they can achieve much better success rates. Sometimes better success rates. But still, I mean, even if I achieve a 40% success rate, that still means that 6 out of 10 times you get rejected for whatever reason, for problems within the concept, for high competition, for anything. And then that doesn't mean that you completely erase everything, your idea or something like that. This is something that can be resubmitted. You can try again for something similar, something like that. Yeah, this is very common. But it does take a lot of time, so it will also evolve during the time.
Yeah.
To give you also to add a little bit an observation that we had recently, we had discussions with some collaborators from abroad. We were trying to do an investment need assessment, see how they would like to get funding for further exploiting some technology that they've been developing. And as part of that, we're discussing about what different types of funding they would prefer to pursue. Horizon Europe wasn't one of them. They said that they would consider that too competitive, too difficult to get, even though it's good funding, it's clean funding for high quality research. They would prefer to pursue other funding sources that they thought they are much easier, much less competitive, even though they are developing technologies that do work, that have actual results. So this is something to be taken into account. But specifically for research and for academics, this type of projects are highly impactful. So this is why we wanted to, we were discussing it with many partners from Nexus, including you, and we're discussing that maybe we should have the training focused on that. Do we have any other questions, something that we would like to discuss now? We can always, of course, you're more than welcome to contact us at any time about these topics, discuss that. But if you would like to have any question now. Okay, then I think we can close the session.
Thank you very much for this contribution.
Thank you very much.
Through the NEXUS-MONARC, of course, project.
Thank you. We will we will need a little bit of time, but we will try to share an overview of this presentation of the training with the consortium and with the registrants, everybody that has registered. So if someone hasn't registered, because we made the link available also via social media or something like that, if someone hasn't registered, you're more than welcome to register now so that we share this material with you later on. It's going to take some time due to other obligations, but we will be sharing this.
Thank you.
There was a raised hand Was there a raised hand? Or,
No, Andreas, it was from my colleague of ours. I guess it was by.
yeah,
by
okay,
mistake.
sorry. Yeah, thanks. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.